Okay, I have a story to read to you by Scott M. Peterson. It's titled DeGranged. DeGranged. Scott writes, Frank M. Canton was a lawman in Johnson County, Wyoming. Way back in 1890, Canton worked as a U.S. deputy marshal there, bringing law and order to an otherwise lawless state. At the same time, he hired on as a stock detective for the Wyoming Stock Growers Association and was also elected sheriff there. So Canton didn't just work for the law, he was the law. Johnson County was in transition back then. Traditionally the territory of cattlemen, it was being transformed by homesteaders in the late 1800s from enormous cattle ranches into small farms. It was all done by something called grangers, also known as middle-class farmers, people despised by cattlemen and, by extension, despised by Canton. The first grange began after the Civil War. It was a secret order founded by a government official named Oliver H. Kelly to organize disadvantaged farmers, which was definitely a threat to cattlemen who didn't just want some of Wyoming, but all of it, which is precisely where Frank M. Canton came in. The brutal winter of 1886-1887 sparked the battle between grangers and cattlemen in Wyoming. Temperatures then hit 50 degrees below zero, killing many cattle. The hot, dry summer that followed finished off more, pushing surviving animals to areas that had been homesteaded and fenced, which drove the cattlemen absolutely bonkers, prompting charges against grangers for cattle rustling. Wyoming lawmakers had already taken the cattlemen's side, passing a law that all unbranded livestock were the property of their constituents. And since grangers didn't brand their animals, they automatically became evidence against them. The only way out was to pull up stakes and leave Johnson County forever, many of them obliged, increasing both the cattlemen's wealth and the corrupt politicians' hold over Wyoming. Among the accused were Jim Averill and Ellen Watson, a husband and wife couple who had arrived in 1887, only to be described, albeit later, as procurer and prostitute, particularly Watson, who became known posthumously as Cattle Kate, after both she and Averill had been lynched for having cattle they'd never owned or even claimed. That was in 1889, and the war was just getting started. Nate Champion, his real name, was a cowboy who didn't like what happened to Averill and Watson, so he pushed back, starting his own group, the Northern Wyoming Farmers and Stock Growers Association, to include grangers, bringing a violent end to himself at the hands of Canton and his gang, shot dead by no less than 28 bullets and left with a sign on his perforated corpse that read, "Cattle Thieves Beware." The conclusion to that fracas was a gunfight at the TA Ranch, where 46 WSGA thugs, including Canton, were besieged until surrendering to the U.S. 6th Cavalry on April 13, 1992, thereby ending the battle but not the war. The cattlemen who'd hired Canton's gang were wealthy Republicans, while the grangers were middle-class Democrats. When Canton was arrested, authorities found a list in his saddlebag. It contained the names of 70 grangers with $50 prices on their heads. But the cattlemen got backed by President of the United States Benjamin Harrison, a Republican, who pardoned all 46 gang members, triggering a scandal that gave Democrats and grangers control of Wyoming in the elections of 1894. Something the cattlemen never forgot. Grangers had become a threat to cattlemen everywhere by then. Within a decade of the Grange's founding, memberships grew to 1.5 million members. It also became a champion for the middle class as the People's Party. In 1896, it fused with the Democratic Party, furthering effective protest against, quote, the menace of privilege in the United States, and furthering the rivalry between cattlemen and grangers. The cattlemen weren't stupid. They'd already penetrated Grange leadership at the national level 2 decades earlier, but the grangers weren't stupid either. So by 1875, the National Grange had lost control of the state granges, expecting members nonetheless to pay dues for the use of its name, many of whom obliged. By 2012, Grange memberships started dropping. That's when the cattlemen began penetrating Grange leadership at the state level, starting with a pricey D.C. law firm named Schiff Hardin, LLP, who pulled out all the stops to gain control of the California State Grange with a big fat lawsuit, something that Grange members couldn't afford, which is just fine because Schiff Hardin's mouth was watering over California Grange property. where each of 175 chapters has its own real estate. So they started throwing their weight around, threatening a lawsuit here or an injunction there, with elderly Grangers who wanted no part of costly legal actions. All they had to do was pack up and leave, just like their Wyoming counterparts did. The only thing Schiff Hardin needed was a smooth talker. That's exactly what they got with Ed Komsky. Komsky, to put it mildly, has a habit of saying things that simply aren't true, especially in official documents, like earlier this year when he tried taking the Inglenook Grange property away from Grange members just north of Fort Bragg. Komsky did that with something called a Form SI-100, declaring himself to be the CEO here and therefore the property owner, which contradicts a later filing proving that Komsky was full of shit, not to mention the deed to that property, which shows uninterrupted title without Ed Komsky. Doubling down, Komsky later got into the building with the help of two Grange members, Don and Marilla possibly, Peeler, both of whom had been convinced by Komsky to do so. Once they got in, the locks were changed to keep members out, documenting it all in a letter demanding they stay out, insisting, again in writing, that the California State Grange owned that property now. As you might imagine, the members didn't take kindly to Komsky's actions, so they broke in and locked him out, leaving Komsky with little recourse except perhaps filing another lawsuit. I'm not saying that Ed Komsky is a liar, but I can't rule it out either. It's possible that he's mental, too, or just plain stupid, maybe even a combination of the above. But one thing's for sure, Ed Komsky has a history of making supersized mistakes. That's apparent on his resume, starting with a car wash. Southern California was home to one of Komsky's two previous endeavors. That was the Mission Viejo Auto Hand Wash, something Komsky started on borrowed money around 1997. By 2002, Komsky was underwater to the tune of $1.1 million and bankrupt, so he moved north to Barstow and gave it another shot with a business called Extreme Convenience, something that was demolished by 2011. That's when he hooked up with Ed Luttrell, president of the National Grange. If Luttrell was looking for a wrecking ball, he couldn't have found one better than Komsky. Luttrell had just dissolved the old California State Grange to start a new one, something that, unlike its predecessor, could hold property. Yeah, and lots of it. But Form 990s for the state entity in 2014 and 2015 show no such ownership. Ditto for the National Grange. Of 175 California Grange properties, none appear on state or national balance sheets, so Luttrell needed someone to go out and get them, somebody who was too crooked, crazy, or stupid to know any better, and that's where Komsky came in. Things didn't go so well for either of them. The lawsuits that Luttrell had launched were bleeding the National Grange dry. Schiff Hardin, the law firm that represented Luttrell's organization, was a wrecking ball too, one that swung both ways. It made mistakes as well. Really expensive ones, like what happened with Bridgeview Bank Group, where it made mistake after mistake in bad tax advice, and ultimately got sued over it. It got so bad that in 2015, 22 Schiff Hardin partners, quote, headed for the exits to open their own law firm. That was in spite of each averaging $980,000 bonuses, a big chunk of which had come from Komsky and Luttrell. Both of them sowed the wind and then reaped the whirlwind. That's apparent in their Form 990s. Komsky's legal expenses more than quadrupled in just 1 year to $164,023, which must have hurt since his revenue was only $148,233. And at a salary of $37,200, he's not getting rich either. Luttrell's in the same boat. His legal expenses went up more than tenfold over the past decade to $743,490 against $1.7 million in revenue for 2014. The difference is coming straight off his balance sheet, something that shows net assets less than half of what they were a decade ago. Now they're hovering at $641,704. Luttrell's paycheck is pretty much frozen at $55,000 a year. The legal fees are paying for 20 separate trademark actions, where Komsky and Luttrell appear to have won a big fat nothing burger for all their trouble and expense, and they may have just dug their own graves. On April 20, 2016, U.S. District Judge William B. Shub ruled in Komsky and Luttrell's favor that they had the exclusive right to use the name Grange. So one by one, former chapters have simply dropped the name right along with their membership dues. Of the 175 former California DeGranged chapters, a whopping 125 have bailed on Komsky and Luttrell, including the Fort Bragg Guild, where Bruce Broderick is a member. He's a man who harbors no ill will toward those who locked him out of his own building. As far as I'm concerned, it's up to the police, he told me. We've already reported it. Broderick told me there were two separate reports, one to the Mendocino County Sheriff's Office over damage to the building for having to force their way back in, and another to the Fort Bragg Police Department over identity theft. According to Broderick, Komsky and Luttrell used a bogus SI-100 to get personal information about elderly members from their bank. With two police reports, I figured there'd be some kind of investigation, but not according to Broderick. The sheriff's deputy told me it was a civil matter, he said. Seriously, so I called my old buddy David Eister up. He's the district attorney for Mendocino County, handles all criminal prosecutions in these parts, to see if he thought it was a civil matter, and particularly since the membership, now averaging ages of 65 and older, are on fixed incomes and can't really afford it. I wanted to know where Mr. Eister drew the line. The perp in this case is Donald Lynn Peeler, born December 16, 1968, according to the Mendocino County voter database, which should make him under 50 years old, and as a registered Republican, puts him squarely on the side of the cattlemen. On the other hand, we have Elmer Whaley, the president of the organization Mr. Broderick belongs to. He was born on March 10, 1936, putting him north of 80 years old today and a registered Democrat. But more importantly, you'd think he's protected against elder abuse from youngsters like Peeler. The damage to Mr. Whaley's hall is estimated at $2,000. Broderick figures the current membership at $50 or so, which means $40 out of Mr. Whaley's pocket for repairs, not to mention any future loss for identity theft. Broderick estimates the average age of his members at over 65 years, meaning they're all out the same amount. Did that seem right to Mr. Eister? Komsky's background is somewhat of a mystery. Public records show that someone with his name graduated from a high school in New Jersey in 1976, but nothing about college. Then we have Edward Luttrell, graduate of Hillsborough High School, but again, nothing about college. Not that it makes any difference. Komsky and Luttrell might not be their real names, for all we know. Frank M. Canton, as it turns out, was an alias. His real name was Josiah Horner. Born in 1849, Horner was an outlaw. In 1871, he started robbing banks. On October 10, 1874, he killed a Buffalo soldier in a gunfight. In 1877, he was arrested by Texas Rangers for robbing a bank in Comanche, Texas, but later escaped to Ogallala, Nebraska, where he took up a herd of cattle. Took up is in quotes, which I think means that he stole them. Yeah, just like Komsky and Luttrell took up some property here in Mendocino County. This writer either made or attempted contact with Grange officials to ask about what happened to Mr. Whaley and the property at 26500 North Highway 1 in Fort Bragg, starting with an email inquiry asking how their actions were consistent with the Grange's motto, in all things charity. Komsky was the first to respond, but ignored my question. That's fine, because Mr. Broderick was kind enough to provide me with a letter including the names, phone numbers, and email addresses of his fellow California State Grange officers. They ignored my email completely. That's okay, too, because I found out where they worked and contacted them there, during business hours, of course. Lillian Booth is Komsky's secretary. Her name was on the SI-100 that was used to break into Mr. Whaley's building. She works for the Paradise Police Department in the Document Management Department. So, I called her supervisor at work. That's Police Chief Gabriela F. Tazari-Dinin. Her phone number there is 530-872-6291. She seems like a very nice lady, but doesn't publish her email address. So I got one for her boss. That's Lauren Gill, L-G-I-L-L, at townofparadise.com. Then dropped her an email with an invitation to comment on this article and what happened to Mr. Whaley. Bob Klaus is on Komsky's executive committee. He ignored my email, too. No problem. He's the owner of Bob Klaus Insurance in Orangevale. Phone number 916-988-3457. State license number 0550206. I gave him a call and left a message, but he never got back to me. No problem. Dave Jones is the California Insurance Commissioner. He seems to be very interested in insurance fraud. His email is fraud@insurance.ca.gov. So I dropped him a line, too, with the same invitation for comment. Inger Bevins is on the executive committee, too. She's an enrolled agent at 12250 Alp Circle in Salinas, California, 93906. Her phone is 831-449-4021. I left her a message as well because she never returned my email. Jerry Allen is on the same committee. His phone is 707-573-6049. I left him a message, too. He also heads up the Sebastopol Grange. Since he didn't return my first email, I dropped him another at grangeevent@gmail.com with another invitation for comment. Next, there's Donald Lynn Peeler. This gentleman works for AmeriGas. We know that because he parked an AmeriGas truck in front of Mr. Whaley's building to block access. AmeriGas's corporate headquarters is in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Phone number 610-337-7000. The CEO there is Jerry Sheridan. He volunteers at St. Agnes to help, quote, develop children of character by coaching flag football. And he was nice enough to leave his email address on their website. It's jerry.sheridan@amerigas.com. So I dropped him an email, too, with the same invitation. Last but not least, Ed Luttrell. He's apparently been replaced by Betsy Huber, president of the National Grange, so I sent them both an email. One to E. Luttrell, Luttrell, at nationalgrange.org, and another to Betsy at nationalgrange.org. I also left a message on Mrs. Huber's phone at 202-628-3507, extension 112. My invitation for comment was identical in every case, as was the response. Crickets. The best I could surmise was that everybody at the state and national levels had been told not to say anything because the matter was in litigation. A little detailed contradicted by the National Grange's own website, which claimed it was over. But that sure wasn't the case for members of the 125 chapters who'd gone out on their own. They had plenty to say. Wally Dubois is an officer with the Cool Community Center. It was officially named Grange No. 1 in California because it held the oldest charter. When I asked if he could tell me something about Komsky that everybody could agree on, he didn't hesitate. He is an asshole, Dubois told me. That is undisputed. Then I asked Broderick if he could think of an image that'd do Grange officials justice for my article. Definitely, he answered. A blow-up doll suits them perfectly. Then, adding with a laugh, that's just about all they're good for. But when I first published this piece, Broderick said the image I'd chosen might be offensive, so I took a second look at it. By God, he was right. At this point in the article that Scott Peterson presented, there's a picture there of the offensive image. I can't see any of the images. All I have is text here, so I just have to imagine it. The caption on my blow-up doll suggested it applied to only some Grange officials. I fixed that with an edit. Now it applies to all Grange officials, but there was another problem. The image I'd chosen had something resembling manhood. How foolish of me. That required immediate attention. So just like Lorena Bobbitt, I took care of that. Now it's completely dickless, just like all Grange officials. Thanks, Bruce. Next on my list was Bill Finkelstein of the Bennett Valley Guild. He's the head honcho there, who agreed with everything that Broderick and Dubois said, and more. Finkelstein pointed out that the National Grange had backed Monsanto's GMO litigations. That certainly checked out. He'd never even met Luttrell, nor did he ever want to, but when I asked if he had anything nice to say about him, he answered, not in the least. Then he turned me on to a fellow member named Craig Harrison, who might have something more to say. Bennett Valley is the oldest continuously operated Grange in California. But thanks to Luttrell's lawsuit, it's now called a guild. That really bothers me, Harrison admitted, because it's located on Grange Road. Harrison thinks it's all about the money for Luttrell and company. They're looking for weak people who won't stand up to them, he told me. That's what got my attention. Harrison has been involved there for less than a decade, and mostly as a community member who attended regular events at the hall, adding, why would somebody even think of taking a property like that? Harrison's question brought back a disturbing memory. Fort Bragg was in a similar situation back in the summer of 2001. Historic Eagles Hall, that's at the corner of Corey and Alder, was in foreclosure then over a similar circumstance. An unscrupulous scumbag named Philip Lopedota, Lopedota, had recruited a handful of dickless people to become executive committee members and then mortgaged the hall for $25,000 in cash to a hard money lender. The Eagles came within a hair's breadth of losing that hall. It was only stopped because of the heroic efforts of local donors who came up with half that amount in a weekend to stop the foreclosure. Harrison is a licensed attorney, California State Bar number 226094, which amplifies his words as follows. Somebody in law enforcement ought to look into this, he told me. It's just not right. Broderick agrees. Quote, the victims have one thing in common, he said. They're all elderly. Okay, but my question was this. If money's being misused, where's it all going? Broderick answered my question with a photo taken from Komsky's Facebook page showing him posing with a couple of hotties in Vegas, baby. Neither of them likely candidates for Grange gatherings, and yet another looking straight into professional cleavage, suggesting where at least some of that money might have gone. But with a shot like that, Komsky must have something downstairs. What really bothered me was the involvement of Amerigas in this whole deal. If what Broderick told me was true, then Amerigas had backed the break-in at the Inglenook Grange Hall in March. So I asked if he could actually identify the truck, which he did by sending me a photograph of the vehicle that apparently was used to block access there. Then I asked if he thought it was the same truck. I couldn't tell you for sure, Broderick admitted, but I recognized the logo was definitely Amerigas. Toward the end of this little project, Bruce Broderick sent me a link to an interview he did with Joe Wagner at KNYO. It lays everything out perfectly, plus some things I hadn't realized, like how he saw the break-in as a land grab and Komsky's fake SI-100 as, quote, corporate identity theft, allegations that, if true, harken back to what the cattlemen did to Johnson County Grangers in Wyoming, something that Luttrell appears to have gotten away with 4 years ago in Wyoming. Wally Dubois sent me a letter about that with all the lurid details. It was from Lee Johnson, president of the Wyoming State Grange, dated September 30, 2013, expressing his concern about how both the Wyoming and California state Granges wouldn't be represented at the national convention. His organization, just like California's, got suspended just before the event, denying them the debate they were entitled to. Furthermore, Luttrell had effectively defunded Wyoming's few remaining Grange chapters, leaving all of those properties ripe for the picking, just like Johnson County homesteads were back in 1890. I sent all the sources named in this article an email requesting a simple fact check on the article itself, including both Luttrell and Komsky. 13 copies went out. None of them bounced. I only got 2 responses to that request. One was from Craig Harrison, suggesting that Komsky's bogus SI-100 might be a criminal offense. Another was from Bill Finkelstein, reporting that he wasn't the head honcho at Bennett Valley, but a head honcho there. Sorry, not the head honcho, but a head honcho there. So I stand corrected on that. Komsky replied indirectly with a brief letter to the Anderson Valley Advertiser, trumpeting a recent court ruling in his and Luttrell's lawsuit against the California State Guild. That letter points to a newsletter where Komsky does an absolute chicken dance over that ruling and refers to several other lawsuits he says are in the works. But he also signed that letter as Ed Komsky, Fort Bragg, which is bizarre. The phone number he gives on the newsletter gives a 916 area code, indicating that he's in Sacramento, not to mention the address on that newsletter showing that he's in Fallbrook, which is located in Southern California. At no point did Komsky challenge any of the facts presented in this article, and neither did Luttrell. One noteworthy response came from AVA, that's Anderson Valley Advertiser blogger B.B. Grace, who's normally well-informed about local matters, but seemed to be misinformed here, saying it's over for the Guild, and suggested that Guild members had been gutting the halls of Grange furnishings, something I wasn't aware of. So just for grins, I went to a potluck dinner last night at the old Inglenook Grange Hall, where Peeler and his wife had broken in a month or two before. About 24 people were there, including Bruce Broderick. Neither hide nor hair was seen of Komsky's group. No furnishings appear to have been removed. It wasn't possible to ask Miss Grace what she was talking about because she wasn't there either. Conversation was lively, but the word Grange was definitely absent. Maybe that's one of the furnishings Miss Grace was talking about. In the event that any Grange leaders decide to man up, I hereby invite them to tell their side of the story at a public debate anywhere without lawyers. But until then, this reporter will call him how he sees him. ... Dickless. Not sure how that applies, but okay. Scott Peterson about the Grange and the Guild, and the name of that article is DeGranged. That's a great deal of work that he did to put that article together, and he puts that amount of work into everything that he does and sends me a new article on a different subject every single week. And that is yeoman's work. Nobody's paying him to do all of that. He, like the rest of us, is working on the projects that need to be worked on and making a living by working in the real world, which is admirable, I think. I would say that's admirable.